Today on the Spring Hills Podcast, we're doing another segment of Beyond the Stage. Now, this is our new worship segment where we bring in different members of the worship team so you can get to know the people that are leading you in worship week in and week out. Now, today we've got with us Patricia Chadwick, who is one of our vocalists, and then also one of our keys players, Jerry Myer. So they're with us. We're going to discuss a variety of worship topics, such as what is worship, why do we worship through music, is worshiping through music the only way to worship, things like that. So we're going to have a discussion here about it. I hope you enjoy this episode of Beyond the Stage here on the Spring Hills Podcast. This is Jerry and Patricia. So welcome, guys. It's great to have you both here. We're doing Beyond the Stage. Now, this is our new worship segment where we talk about what it means to be living a life of worship outside of just worshiping through music. So we're going to go through a couple discussion questions, but first, the other goal that we have with this is to get to know the worship team here at Spring Hills. Now, you all know me. You hear me talk all the time, but I wanted you to also know the other worship leaders. So we want to get to know you a little bit. So where are you from? I know you're not from Santa Rosa. So where are you from? What brought you here to Santa Rosa?
So I was born and raised in San Jose, so the South Bay, which is different from up here. But basically, I spent my whole childhood, young adulthood in San Jose. And then I met this guy. My husband, and Kelly, Kelly Chadwick. And he was born and raised up here, actually, in Windsor, and throughout the Santa Rosa area. So he had been here at Spring Hills for a few years already, but when we met, I was still in San Jose. So through our relationship, it was kind of like we knew at some point someone had to move somewhere.
Uh-oh, he won the battle.
Well, and it was one of those things where we were both very open to, okay, God will show us at the right time who needs to go where. But I knew pretty early on, once we started talking about marriage or being married someday, that God was pulling and calling me up here. It's weird, but I somehow knew.
Yeah, no, I understand that completely. It's crazy when you know that. It is weird to move from your hometown and be like, I'm supposed to leave my hometown now and go to this place where it feels like home also, which is strange.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
And it was very, very clear.
And now, how long have you guys been married?
Almost 4 years.
Cool.
4 years this October.
Great. And then Jerry, where are you from?
Ukiah, California.
Born and raised?
I was born in Eureka, and my parents moved to Ukiah when I was 4.
Cool. Okay, so you've been in Ukiah basically
Pretty
your
much.
entire life. Were you anywhere else when you were in college or anything like that?
I lived in Roanoke Park for about 4 years.
Did you do school here?
No.
Okay.
Mendocino College and
Got
then St. Mary's College.
Cool. Oh, yes, I knew that, but our listeners maybe didn't. So St. Mary's College, cool. And then, Patricia, where'd you go to college?
I went to Santa Clara University.
And now you are a teacher.
Yes, I am.
So, Patricia, for all of you teachers out there are quite a few of you, Patricia understands all of the struggles and the stresses and anxiety that comes along with all of the unknowns right now.
I know it well.
Trying to figure out exactly what's going to be happening throughout the next school year, because it's coming up kind of quick, right? And then, Jerry, you're from Ukiah, so what brought you here to Spring Hills? Because you still live there.
Still live in Ukiah, yeah. So we commute down here for weekends and other events that are here.
Yeah.
Ukiah.
Cool. And then, your wife, Carol, also serves on the Spring Hills team here.
Yep.
And Carol, I've got to know her a little bit. She is a North Carolina gal.
She is.
And so you have your fandom for the North Carolina Tar Heels is, let's just call it diehard. Is that a good word for that?
Yes.
Or for her, maybe not for you.
Yeah, I'm married into it.
Yeah.
49ers and, Giants and all that stuff, but Bay Area. But,
the Tar Heels are a big deal to Carol. If you ever see Carol in the coffee kiosk, now she, obviously right now we don't have the coffee kiosk rolling, but if you ever meet Carol in the coffee kiosk and you say anything about Duke basketball, you will immediately see disdain.
She might come over the counter.
She might jump over the counter and start a fight, but not really. No, Carol's super sweet, and it is fun to give her a hard time sometimes with Duke and North Carolina, that rivalry. But so I want to ask you, just let everybody know, when did you join the worship team? And this is kind of a funny question, simply because both of you fall under the same category as Brennan did. Now, we met Brennan on the podcast last time. He started the first week that I started, And Jerry, you also started the first week that I started.
Correct.
And Patricia, you were the first audition
It's true.
that I had, which was the first week. I don't even think. No, I wasn't. I hadn't even moved here yet.
No.
I think I was on my first week on staff, and you auditioned that Saturday.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, you had even driven up here.
Yes.
Like that
I didn't live here yet.
Day.
Mm-hmm. I literally had pulled in the parking lot
Yep.
from that drive and got here, and I remember walking in with you guys
Right.
and meeting you and Kelly. So, it's crazy that you, both of you, and then Brendan also started I think you started technically the week after.
I did.
And
I
then-
was 1 week removed. But,
Yeah,
you know.
and that was really great to have you join us at that time also. So it was really cool because being new to the church, I don't know how much I've told you guys about this, but being new to the church, from my background of being at a smaller church and having one consistent, basically 5 people in the band that were either there or not there, and coming here and having the people that have been in the band, such as, John Sapiente has been playing for, 15 years or something like that. We had Chris Eccles, who'd been playing since he was like 11.
Right.
So there's a bunch of people that had been in the band for so long. So it was actually really helpful to me to have new people here because I didn't feel like I was walking into something that I wasn't overwhelmed with oh man, here I am now. I'm going to be the worship leader, kind of in charge of this ministry here. And all of these people have been here for years. They all know each other well.
Right.
Now, you also know that all these people are insanely nice and fun people to be around. So it wasn't.
They were? Really?
Well, yeah, Jerry.
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
so
Okay.
another thing you need to
Some.
know about Jerry. Jerry is extremely sarcastic. So am I. So if you ever around me and Jerry, you might hear a little bit of back and forth with
little bit.
sarcasm
Just a
and
little
bashing
bit.
on each other. But
Yeah, just a little
so I had already asked you guys a little bit what instruments you play. Patricia, you're a vocalist. Do you play other instruments?
I do play the piano somewhat, but
I did not know that.
oh dear.
Oh, you need to start playing.
I don't have a piano at home though, or a keyboard.
So did you
I have
take?
an
So
extra
it's
one.
been a long time since I practiced.
Because Andrea also somewhat plays the piano, what she says,
Right.
and I also I've heard her play. She's good. She's a good piano player.
Oh yeah.
And so, but she doesn't do that here, and that's fine.
Mhm.
You know, you guys are vocalists, and that's great. We need the worship leaders, the vocalists. But yeah, did you play growing up? Is that
Growing up, yeah. And that actually is how I started in music.
Oh, cool.
Was because I started piano lessons at a pretty young age. And then over time, it was like, oh, I actually really like singing too.
And what was your vocal background then? Because you have actually some like choir and that kind of stuff in your background.
So, growing up in church, that was, probably also those early mid-90s. The movement was
yeah.
choral singing
Yes.
in church. You know, you guys know.
Of course.
So that was my first early exposure to singing
Uh-huh.
through church. And then I think probably in college, I was just looking for what's that easy A class.
Mm-hmm.
It was a really rigorous course though that I was taking, and they had this chorale, and I went, oh, and I love singing, and sure, okay, I need an easy A somewhere. And it actually ended up being so good. It did help me with some vocal technique,
Oh, cool.
which I'd never had before.
That's awesome.
So that really worked out. God
Cool.
was good.
And then did you continue to sing at church and stuff?
Yeah,
through college?
continue to sing through college. It was a very different mindset, I think, into what worship, the style of worship, and the music itself was at the time, very performance-y, I think.
Right, yeah.
But we'll probably touch on that later. But
Yep.
that's kind of the background.
Cool. Jerry, what's your musical background? You play the keys, so when did that start?
Probably maybe third grade.
Okay. We should say, now this, I do have to point out, because people can't see us, you are of
Old.
an older generation.
Yes, I'm old.
I wouldn't call you old. I don't want to offend anybody, but you are of an older generation. Now, you are, so I'm 33, and you're roughly the age of my dad, or
Yeah.
Pastor Brett. You're around that age,
I'm
right?
60.
So,
I'm 60 years
you're
old.
okay with saying it. I didn't want to say it. I didn't
60
want to be
years
the one to
old.
bring it up. But so Jerry's 60. We have this thing where we have only a few people that are. I call Jerry Uncle Jerry. He is not actually my uncle. If
I
you
love
ever
it.
actually hear me call him Uncle Jerry, no, we're not related. I don't know why I started calling you Uncle Jerry. I think I just felt like you were my uncle. I'm not sure why. You loved that I called you one of my best friends on the last podcast.
Absolutely.
No, I just wanted to
feeling's
point
mutual,
out
by
how
the way.
old you
Aw.
were was it's relevant. It's not. I'm not trying
Yeah.
to poke fun at you, but
But I am the most immature person on
which
the
I
worship team,
absolutely-
so that kind of blends in.
We're growing up together.
Yes.
That's what it is.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah, you're almost
Love
twice
it.
my age, and we're growing up together.
Exactly.
Okay, so 3rd grade. Go ahead.
My parents wanted to get an instrument in my life, and so I think they kind of chose piano. I don't know if I remember actually picking that instrument. I know they didn't want drums. I know that.
No parent does.
No.
Right.
So I think piano
Unless you have an electric kit.
Yeah. And so I took piano lessons, started with a little old lady down the street. And kind of the funny story is that I started on the exact same day with this girl that was the same age as I was. We started the very same day. After the first recital, we were kind of going in different directions. And I wanted to go out and play baseball and ride my bike and do all those things. I did not want to practice.
Right.
This girl just practiced 6 hours a day, in 3rd grade. And so when this little old lady wanted to retire from this teaching career, she passed the torch on to another gentleman that was in town. It was another older man. His name was Schulze. He was this very, very German piano teacher, very strict from what I heard.
Okay.
I wanted no part of that. And the girl that I started with, she went on with him. Well, she's now a concert pianist.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
She is so I graduated
Do you still know her?
Oh yeah, I graduated high school. She's in Ukiah, but she
that's
tours
awesome.
around us. Yeah, she's amazing.
That's cool.
But I always like to say I started the same day she did.
And how do you compare in skills now, Jerry?
Not
a concert pianist?
No.
Oh, that's funny, man. That's cool. That's actually.
It didn't stick with me. But I've kind of, purchased a keyboard over many times in my lifetime, and kind of pick it up and put it back down. I tried guitar.
You love the technical side of it.
Oh, I love it.
Because when we talk about stuff, your passion is more of it. I call you a setup guy. You love the setup side of it. You love to set it up the most efficient way, the best way, what's going to sound the best, and you spend a lot of time on that, focusing on learning the equipment, which is really cool because not everybody can do that. I never had that passion to learn the equipment behind what I was doing. I was like, yeah, put a guitar in my hands, great. Right. Oh, that pedal does what? Cool, I'll press that pedal. That kind of thing. Versus guys, Sean is this way too, where he knows the pedals inside and out. He knows exactly what's going on in his instrument. So it's really cool that you've got that desire to have that knowledge.
I'm always kind of looking for new sounds and new technology, and most of what I do is computer based. So that kind of stuff really.
Yeah. One of the things that I know a lot of people don't know about seeing somebody who's on keys with worship music is the worship music has taken a turn over the years to very synthesizer driven stuff. Now piano has kind of made a little bit of a comeback again. There's a lot of piano stuff. I think probably the mid 2000s it seemed like it was all very electric guitar heavy.
Mm-hmm.
And then early 2010s you started to hear the synthesizer, and now there's a really good mix of everything. Like it's really cool. The worship stuff now, we're very fortunate. We have great worship songwriters that we get to play the songs that they write. But it's really interesting to hear people talk about the piano and they think that whoever's back there on the piano is playing the piano. Because I've had people say, I can't hear the piano. I'm like, he's not playing the piano. He's playing the synth, or the pads or something like that. So there's so much you could do with it. Now that you can hook it into a computer, it's like endless possibilities. You can do so much with it. So it's cool that you can do that. So I want to ask you a couple things about Spring Hills Worship in general. Now, as we already talked about, you guys both joined roughly the time that I did, which is cool. Now, Jerry, you were in audition before I was here. I got the picture of you. I still remember seeing the picture that they sent, meet your new pads player. And I'm like, that guy's old. No, I'm just kidding. And then Patricia, I was actually here for your audition, which was cool. But what's your favorite part of being part of the Spring Hills worship team?
I think being part of the team, the camaraderie, a lot of the stuff that goes on behind the scenes, I think it keeps me grounded, definitely, and connected. It's my small group at this point, and the relationships that we've built through that. And then I feel like I'm part of something. I always want to be serving in church. And to me, this is just something that kind of fits, and I'm allowed to be creative and just get to make some great friends.
And you've done a lot of, you grew up in church, right? And then you started serving in the last church you were at. You did a lot of their technical setup and all that. So you've been serving in churches for a long time.
Yeah. I don't know, probably in my 30s, I think. It was a small church, small Baptist church, and they got me involved in a lot of different things and got in some leadership, different things. It was really kind of strange. I'd been going there for a long time, and then they said, well, we need somebody on this one committee. And so I said, okay. So I show up for this first committee meeting, not knowing what to do, what I'm supposed to say or do or anything, just being part of this committee. And the chairman of the committee was leaving and going to do something else. And they said, well, we need to vote on somebody for a new chairman. Well, we think Jerry should do it. And I get voted on. It's my first committee meeting. I'm the chairman the next week. And oh, by the way, you're now on the executive committee for the church, in with the pastor and 3 other deacons or something else. It was the weirdest setup.
Yeah.
And so 2 weeks later, I'm sitting in there with like everybody that's, been in this church for 40 years,
looking at you,
looking at me. And so I was actually involved in hiring the first youth pastor that they ever had. Just different things like that. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
What about you, Patricia? What's your favorite part of being part of, let's say, the Spring Hills worship team, but also just serving in general? Because you serve in other areas.
I do, yes.
Well, actually, let's start there. What other areas do you serve on here?
So I serve in Stephen's ministry, which has been a huge blessing, just caring for other people when they need just love and someone to walk beside them.
We're going to do a Stephen's ministry episode soon with Garett and John. And talk about Stephen's ministry and what it is and what the benefits of it are. So
I love it.
Is that the only team that you're on besides the worship team?
Currently, it's those two. I was also working, or serving, I should say, in the children's wing for a little while, or for maybe about 1.5 years. And then I was like, well, right when I started doing Stephen's ministry, I was like, let me refocus a little bit. And even though I love children's ministry, I've done it for a lot of my life. And I thought, let me try something that's a little different.
Well, and you're still in children's
ministry with and I was going to say, and I still minister to children,
that's cool.
Honestly, all the time. But I think what I've really grown to love, very much like Jerry said, is the relationships that have come through worship ministry here at Spring Hill specifically. I feel truly like I've gained all these siblings. Mm-hmm. You're not even just friends, you're siblings.
It is a very interesting dynamic.
And my cousins,
or
and
grandpas.
Grandpas, yeah.
I do have an Uncle Jerry though, so I'm like, hey, I've got 2 Uncle Jerrys now. This is great. But yeah, and they're deep relationships. It's I can come to you all and say, I'm hurting, or I'm struggling, or I'm overjoyed, and you're all in it with me, and vice versa.
It's a small group. I mean, that's what the goal of small groups is, to have this community. So it is really cool, because it's you might not see somebody for a couple months. Like with the way I see everybody all the time, but the way we schedule it, if you sing one weekend in a month and then the next month your weekend doesn't match up with somebody else. I mean, you and Andrea, for the first year, I don't even know that you got to sing together.
Maybe once.
And it was Easter year. Probably, right? Yeah. Like one of the big events. Like It was like that, to where it was like, it was basically a few people wouldn't see each other for months at a time.
So true.
Which is kind of, it's odd, but it's a really interesting dynamic, because the next time you see them, it's like you pick right back up.
Absolutely.
I've seen it so many, especially right now with people that there's a few people from the band that haven't been able to come back since the COVID-19 stuff started. And I know that as soon as they come back, it's going to pick up right where they left off. They're going to hug everybody, say hello. Everybody missed them. That happened with Jerry. You came back finally after a couple months where we hadn't seen you, and you get back and everybody's just like, Jerry! And it's just really, it is like a family. It's very cool. We spend a lot of time together.
It's true.
20 minutes later, it was, oh, Jerry.
I know. He's like,
and
Jerry!
then we got right back into our jokes, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, and then I also wanted to ask you, how specifically has worship through music impacted your life?
Oh, I mean, for me, I think it just consistently comes back to this closeness with God. Whether it was through childhood and just knowing that music always drew me nearer to God, and whether it's in your highest highs, your lowest lows, and everything in between, it keeps me grounded in where am I spiritually with God. Worship is kind of almost like a gauge. You know, if I'm disconnected in worship, then I'm disconnected in other areas in my spiritual walk. So kind of helps me gauge, where am I, Lord, with you? And just kind of continuing to push on in my walk and grow.
Awesome. Yeah. Jerry, what about you?
Very similar. I think it gives me structure, and it does keep me grounded and keeps me connected. And that's the part I love the most.
Yeah. I think worshiping through music has had such a huge impact on my life, and I think that's obvious with me just because that's what my job is now. And I do look at it as it's so much more than my job. Don't get me wrong, but I'm so blessed that it is my job because I get so much out of it in so many different ways. The worship through music, I've never thought of it that way as like a gauge, but I definitely look at it as different weekends. I can tell where I'm at because there are weekends where it genuinely feels harder for me to focus on the right things. And it's tough sometimes to be focused on the right things, to not be distracted. And we're going to talk about some distractions and challenges of that later because there's been some interesting things throughout my ministry career of what distractions can do, what they are. They've changed, they shift, and what what can be the biggest distractions at any certain time and how they change. So yeah, I want to talk about that a little bit later, but I do also want to just kind of mention again, worship beyond the stage, which is what we're talking about in this podcast is beyond the stage. And we're talking about it in two ways. So we want you to get to know the people that are on stage, know their hearts, know their background, get to know us. I feel like there sometimes can be this gap between the congregation and the stage that is, some people, it's really great because we've gotten to know people in our congregation to where they get to they'll come up and talk to us. And sometimes I can tell there are people that are like, am I allowed to approach the stage? Like it's that kind of,
right.
Is this allowed? Because it can be a little intimidating when there's, it's a big church. It can be a little intimidating to walk up towards the stage to talk to somebody that you just saw on stage. And I remember being that, to be like, can I go talk to this guy? And I went to a conference a few years back, and this is where I thought of this, was I had just started at Spring Hills. The worship leaders from Highlands Church were at this conference at Central Church in Henderson, near Vegas. And John Larson, who's the worship pastor at Highlands, he had just got done leading worship. He walked back during like the little greeting time thing, and he stood at the sound booth. And I, during the thing, just saw him standing there, and I was so just like, can I go up to him and say hi? And then I was like, of course I can walk up to him and say hi and tell him thank you for leading worship, and I did that. And he just turns and he just goes, oh, dude, thanks for saying that. Like, it's actually been kind of a rough morning. So, and I'm like, that's crazy to me because here you are on this huge stage. And I actually had the thought, like, maybe I shouldn't bug him, like that. And it's just like, no. That barrier sometimes that, like, I want to break that barrier down, let people get to know us because
Absolutely.
I don't want that. I will always want people to be like, hey, I can go say hi and share something with them or whatever. So that's part of the goal here, is to get to know our band, our worship team, and then also to talk about worship beyond the stage, what it means to be worshiping beyond worshiping through music. So we'll talk about that first. Colossians 3:17 says, whatever you do in word or deed, do it in the name of Jesus. And I want to talk about that. So specifically, what might it look like to do, we'll say your job, we'll start there, your job, or it could be other aspects in your life, but as an act of worship. So your family life, your friends, the relationships you have, whatever it is, your hobbies, what that might look like to do that as an act of worship.
I think for me, worship starts with gratitude and being thankful. And so I try to look at every aspect of my life, and I'm grateful and thankful for things that I have, things that relationships that I've built, and my job, everything, family, and I think having that, being grounded in a worshipful thought or in gratitude, it just translates into how I want to approach my day and dealing with other people, and versus, something if it was more about me and then what I need to get out of this day versus what I can give or give back.
Yeah.
Right. No, I totally agree. I mean, in thinking through, it was almost as if anything that means I have to extend beyond myself for other people, for their needs before mine, especially when I know God's calling me to do so, that's worship, right? And whether that's in my job, in my marriage, with family, with friends, it often ends up taking extra energy or time from me, but that's what makes it worship.
Yeah.
Because that's what
There's
we're
a
called to
sacrifice.
do. Exactly. And that's really, truly living out just Christ's love for other people. So I couldn't agree more, Jerry.
I love, this is one thing that I've told you before, Patricia, and we did the first team night that we did. The theme was Choose Joy, and we got to pick somebody from our team that represented that, and you were the one that I had picked.
Yeah.
Choosing joy, because if you know Patricia, you don't often see Patricia not smiling. First of all, you're smiling right now. You've been smiling this whole podcast.
Guilty.
And it's amazing. Johnny is this way too. Johnny, who plays bass for us,
Yes.
Johnny is always smiling.
It's infectious. I love it.
It is. And it's not that like the other people in the group aren't positive people, but there's something about the smile. And I really do believe that the way that you choose joy in your life, because I guarantee you there are times where you don't feel like smiling, but you're still smiling, right?
Yeah.
And you choose joy. You choose to be happy. And I've seen you do that, and that's a way to be worshiping. And it's infectious. It really is. If you're here on a weekend and you're smiling and you're encouraging people, it lifts the whole group up in the green room, on the stage, and then it goes beyond the stage to the worship team. And I think that's a huge it's a huge testimony to how you live your life. Because if you didn't live your life that way, you wouldn't always be walking into the green room with a smile on your face. Because I don't always walk into the green room with a smile on my face. Sometimes I'm stressed out. You guys have seen that happen. And it's I have to tell you how much of an effect the positivity has of like choosing joy has on me as not just a worship leader, but just as a husband, as a father, as a friend. To see people choosing joy is always it's infectious, and it really is impactful for me. So only can imagine people going through a hard time at work and you see them and you're smiling, like it's an impact on other people. And someone might be going, I want what she has. Like, why is she always happy? I want to know why it's not just that you're a happy person.
Right. It's so much
more
more
than
than
you're
that.
living a life of worshiping and, like Jerry said, of gratitude. You're thankful, right?
Right.
So it's a huge impact that your joy has. It's very obvious too.
Oh,
so
thanks.
that's one of the reasons that I wanted to bring Patricia on, is also to share that kind of thing. The impact that she has on the group is on the band is huge. And not to say that the other people don't have that huge impact, but specifically that is the first thing that comes to my mind when somebody were to ask, hey, go down the list of what's the non-musical impact that these people in the band have. I could say something different for each person, and it's all like, this is why we're a team. We need all of these. And it's really cool to see how that has gone into your own lives. So Jerry, I know one of the things, you've come here before, you came here one morning, I'm going to guess it was probably a year after we had gotten here. You were driving on the freeway. I forget what song we were singing. Maybe you remember this. And you shared with the band that morning, because you were driving here. You have a long drive. The rest of us are driving maybe 15 minutes tops to get here, and you're driving an hour.
Yeah,
and so you leave to get here on Sunday mornings by 7:15. You're on the road, 6 o'clock, 6:15, and you had shared that you had seen the sun rising, and you had a moment of worship in your car where you were just in awe of what God created, and so you are one of the older, more mature people.
Yes,
in the
much
band.
more mature.
Much more mature in age is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, age.
But
Let's get that right.
with that comes a certain amount of respect that we all have for you. That you've lived, you have more experience. You've seen God work in your life for years and years, and so you have a different kind of gratitude and joy that maybe some of us haven't learned yet. And there's even somebody as young as 17 years old in the band at one point when we were first all starting here, right? So do you remember this experience? Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do.
Do you want to share about that a little bit?
Well, yeah, I think, getting up early, it takes me about 30 minutes to wake up. So the first 30 minutes of my drive, I'm pretty much asleep.
Great.
Yeah.
Stay off the
Highway
roads.
Patrol, if you're listening to that.
101 South on
101
Sunday
South.
mornings.
That's right. Come get me.
You see a truck
Yeah. And
swerving a little bit, and you see a bald head. It's Jerry.
It's Jerry.
Yeah, the coffee kicks in about Cloverdale. And then, so I gauge it by towns, it's like go along. And I don't know, I think I came around the corner and the sun was coming up and there was like a mist over the vineyards. And kind of and the sun starts breaking through their clouds, and I'm listening to worship music as, I'm listening to the songs we're playing that morning usually as I'm, just kind of my last minute little rehearsal for myself. But it's also my time. I think for me, probably the most worshipful time for me, or even the time I'm closest to God, is when I'm in the car and by myself.
This is what Brendan said last week too.
Yeah. And in fact, Carol and I both do that. When we get in the car and we drive, most of the time there's not a lot of discussion going on. That's kind of our time to even sitting next to each other. It's just this time to decompress and think and listen to music. And we both like listening to the worship music in the car. And I've had moments where, because I'm kind of an emotional person, and I will pull over to the side of the road sometimes because it's just, I can't drive right now. And that was kind of one of those mornings. I don't remember I pulled over to the side, but I mean, it was like you slow down and you're really kind of taking everything in. And it was, I forgot the song that I was listening to at the time.
I want to say it was "What a Beautiful Name" because it was it was when we were close to the time we had started. I don't think it was very long after. So that one was still on the regular rotation at that point. Yeah,
and it was just kind of what I was visually seeing and the words that I was listening to just kind of melded together, and it was this. I know we talk, worship isn't just feeling, but I do believe there's a difference between feeling and emotion, and emotion I think is much bigger, and I think the emotion just kind of overtook me, and it was a pretty big deal, and I kind of came in here and I wanted to the first few minutes I was here, I was still kind of feeling that, but I mean, last week I was going up in Montana and seeing my daughter and my grandkids, and I flew into Spokane and wanted to make that drive because I'd never been there, and it's about a 6-hour drive through Idaho and into Montana. And you're driving along some of the most beautiful country in the world, I think, and along a river. There was a couple times where I'm listening to the worship music and just pulling over to the side and just kind of sitting there for a while and watching a river and listening to the music. And that was kind of a worshipful time. It's a 6-hour drive. It took me like 8.5 just because of those little stops like that.
Well, I don't want to sit in the car with you.
No, you don't. But the speed
I could
limit
probably
up there was
learn
90
a
miles
lot.
an hour. The speed limit up there is it's 80 miles an hour. But
I was like,
go
wait,
90. No,
what is this? The Autobahn? What?
Yeah.
That's
speed limit is 80
good
miles
for
an
you
hour.
guys.
Oh
yeah, and
goodness.
if you're not going,
it's not
90,
like driving through Portland 55.
No.
Which I can tell you, one of the most miserable drives I've ever been on was when you get out of California up north and get into Oregon, and you're just like, hold on, I got to go 55, and then everybody was like, well, yeah, and then if they see your California plates,
you will be stopped.
You will get pulled over.
Absolutely.
And I don't know how I didn't get pulled over because there were so many times that I think I got stuck behind trucks because God was like, dude, you need to slow down. You're going to get a ticket. You don't need a ticket. Anyways.
Well, I was wanting to do 60 miles an hour because I wanted to see the
scenery.
wanted
to see it all. So you got people honking at
like,
you.
Oh, yeah, it was horrible.
Yeah. You know what, though? That's really cool because thinking of it in different ways, I love talking about this kind of stuff because it's all things that we differ in ways of what worship is to us and how it impacts our life. And I want to talk about this now with there's a couple things I want to talk about with you guys today. So we're basically going to focus on I'll say it's going to focus down to distractions. And we're going to talk about a couple things within it. So worshiping through adversity and things that are causing you to take your eyes off of what truly matters. And now I do want to say that we're going to focus on this in both a musical way and just life in general. And as I see you both flipping your pages of your notes, I will say that I might jump around here a little bit. So I'm sorry if I'm throwing you off. But we're talking about our own private worship. Jerry, you mentioned it in the car. Patricia, what's the time that you feel like you get the most like one-on-one worship time with God in the way that you're maybe directly, in prayer, in a devotional, singing, whatever it is, that you feel like you get the most one-on-one worship time?
I think probably for me, it probably looks a little different pre-COVID versus now.
Of course. And it's going to look a little different after.
And it will. Sure. But I think right now, like where I am right now, there's a lot of time at home. And that is different for me. Usually I'm go, go, go. So it would have been time in the car, probably, where, I turn off the radio. I just worship through a song or in prayer or whatever. But now I find I'm home and I have time to devote without having to go one place to the other. So I feel like I'm just more intentional in the things that I do, maybe that would have been mundane. But even something as simple, so Kelly and I, we go for walks. We've been going on a lot of walks. And it's kind of similar to Jerry, what you were saying in the car. You may not even need to talk. Like you're both in the car. We're walking. Sometimes we're talking it up, and sometimes we're just walking. Yeah. And I'm internally worshiping as we walk and just saying, Lord, this is such an amazing afternoon. Just, this breeze, getting this time with my husband to just walk in the afternoon. A few months ago, this would not have been happening. We would not have had the quote unquote time to do that. So just kind of worshiping in things that, like I said, would have been mundane or we wouldn't have had time to do. And now being more intentional with that time, or at least trying to be. That's what it is. I'm not successful at it, but knowing that God's growing me in it and that I'm open to it, that is just amazing.
I think for me, and this is not going to come for a surprise, as a surprise to anybody, I really do get the most worship time during my practice with the music. Mm-hmm. I think the big thing with me is if you guys know this about me, and I shared it last week as well, I'm so big on having everything memorized. Now, this is part of the reason why I think God put me in the position that I'm in, is because I don't just memorize what I need to be singing or what I need to be playing. I memorize what everybody else should be doing to the best I can. Now, I'm obviously not perfect at it. I'm not a drummer, so we are very blessed to have great drummers that I just kind of go, that sounds right. Like, I trust you. That's what's supposed to be happening there, Ricky.
You
great.
Notice he didn't say keyboards. He said drummers.
Well, and you've seen me.
it's like, he's always turning to Jerry.
Jerry. Are you playing the
Jerry.
4 or the 6 there? Be honest.
Yeah.
Be honest. And you're like,
what key are you playing in?
So I listen to it happens more than the reason this is funny is because this happens more than you think. But what I'm really getting at here is that because I listen to it so much, God's given me the magical gift to not get sick of songs super easy. So I will listen to it over and over.
Right.
And what happens with that is I'm memorizing lyrics and I'm hearing these lyrics over and over and over and over. And the great thing about not getting sick of songs and the way that it happens is that I find something that is really meaningful to me every time we sing it. And I'll give you an example that I gave last week as well or a couple weeks ago with Andrea and Brennan, is that This Is Amazing Grace is a song that is probably one of the top 5 most played songs the last 8 years. And we're doing that this weekend. We recorded it yesterday with the band, and we're going to be doing that this coming weekend. And I think by the time this podcast comes out, it'll be last weekend. But we're singing This Is Amazing Grace. And we're recording it the other day. Every time that I sing it, I'm still joyful to sing it. And it's not because I'm being fake about like, I'm going to act happy in this song. No, I genuinely love that song. And the reason is not necessarily because it's a great song, because it is a great song. Obviously it is. It wouldn't be played as much as it is if it wasn't a great song. But the reason is because when I'm singing that song, there's the words that come across each time that are meaningful to me in a different way every time. So yesterday, there's a line in the song that I focused on this time that I wasn't so focused on last time. Last time I was so focused on that you bared my cross. That was the thing that I was focused on. Yesterday, when we're singing the song, who brings our chaos back into order? How relevant is that to us right now?
Yeah.
He brings our chaos back into order. And it's like, oh God, please bring this chaos back into order. Right. And then to know, like, I can trust that he's going to. Like, I don't need to be anxious right now with everything that's going on. I can trust that God's going to bring our chaos back into order. And that's with me. I worship so much through practicing because there will be a line in a song that I maybe never focused on before. Very similar to when you read scripture. Like, oh, you know what? I've never thought about it this way. I've never been focused on this before because now this is what's relevant to my life. Let's take a quick break. I want to talk to you about the Spring Hills Church app. Head on over to the App Store, search for Spring Hills Church, download it, and you can see all the amazing resources that we've got on there for you. You can watch the sermons, you can listen to the podcast, you can give, you can connect, you can find out about all of the events and ongoings here at Spring Hills. It really is a great resource. So go download the app, search in the App Store for Spring Hills Church, and I've said app way too many times, but trust me, the Spring Hills Church app is the app that you want to download in the App Store, so go check out that app right now. So I want to talk about idolatry. Let's look at what are some modern-day examples of idolatry, things that might be put higher on our altar of praise rather than God. Not necessarily
So
just for
many.
yourself, but, you know,
in general.
you work, so Patricia you work at a school.
Mhm.
Jerry, you work in insurance. This is very different from what Brennan is a teacher also, but
Right.
from what they are seeing on a daily basis and what I see on a daily basis. So I'm curious, modern day examples of what we might be putting higher on our altar of praise.
I think one thing that sticks out to me, and it's more so than just work or your job, but this idea of success, like being successful, and that can look different ways, right? And it's not inherently a bad thing to want that.
Yeah.
But if the pursuit of it takes over every aspect, including God, then something's definitely not right.
Well, it's kind of like
right?
the money is not what's evil; it's the love of money.
Exactly. So I think, and it maybe as a teacher, it looks a little different than some big business. You know, success means money, but as a teacher, success means, you know, your classroom looks a certain way, and it looks like Instagram teachers that have these amazing classrooms that do these amazing things for their kids and for their families, and that you're almost going so much the extra mile that you're sacrificing everything else. And just remembering, well, those things are not success in God's eyes, first of all. But then also that's an idol. If I'm constantly looking to be a certain thing or look a certain way, my classroom needs to look a certain way or whatever, and it's distracting me from the ministry that God has called me to as a teacher with those students I have right now. I only have them for a short time, you know? So I want to really capitalize on that time. And if the bulletin board looks icky, oh well, you know? But I can impact these kids in a way that is so much deeper than how pretty this classroom looks right now. So I guess that's one way for me, just off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, obviously things, you know, it's you talk about money, it's what money buys. And we're bombarded, I mean, every 30 seconds on an advertising. If you're on social media, or if you're on your computer, or if you're on anything, working on the internet, anything like that, pop-ups, all kinds of stuff. And, you know, I mean, you can just, in your phone, you know, order 15 things from Amazon in the next 15 seconds. I mean, you know, it's so...
And get them in one day.
And so it's, you know, we tend to collect things, building garages and adding on to your home so you can put your stuff in, you know, and things like that. So I think a lot of those things can be idols. I think time, or my time, you know, things that I want to do, and those things can get in the way of spending time with God. And again, that's why I enjoy the car, because there's not a lot of distractions.
Yeah.
You know, for me, I've been between that road between Ukiah and Santa Rosa, I don't know, 5 billion times.
You could do it in your sleep.
I probably could.
Oh, you do.
I do. Well, between Ukiah and Cloverdale,
only
yes.
That's
halfway.
right.
Oh, no, that's only on Sunday mornings. Saturday nights, totally awake.
Right.
But,
okay. Great.
Yeah. You know, so I can zone out and think and do a lot of those things when I'm in the car. But when I'm at home or at work or things like, there's so many distractions. So it's the phone, or sometimes I'm just sitting on my own, you know, Apple phone or iPhone and just looking at stuff. And that's why the new thing they have on there now with
The screen time.
The screen time gives you a report at the end of the week.
Scary.
I don't want to talk about what mine is,
Right.
because I can just sit there for like an hour and all of a sudden go, what have I done for the last hour?
Oh, yeah.
YouTube deep dive.
Yeah. And I'm not thinking that it's like, I'm not
about ocean life.
Right.
Right.
And it's
How
like
tall was Jesus?
when you look at one video, like I'll look at a Spring Hills video or something like that, and all of a sudden that, you know, it pops up where there's 15
Oh, it's
videos,
the worst.
and I'm like 30 videos into it going, oh, wait a minute, how did I get to this point, you know?
Right.
But I don't know, there's so many distractions for our
Oh my
time,
gosh,
and it's a constant battle.
I
That
call it
happened to me.
mindless scrolling.
Yeah.
Mindless.
Yeah.
You know?
Mindless scrolling.
I actually grew up in a time when Google did not exist. That's how old I am.
Yeah.
Right?
You also
We
grew up when
should-
electricity didn't exist, right?
No, I had electricity, but I did have the rotary phones when you had to actually
course,
dial
yes.
to dial. There was no push buttons.
See, we're still at least of the generation that understands how a rotary phone
This
works.
is true.
If
We
you,
get it.
If you wanted to talk to your friend, you actually got on your bicycle and went over to his house, cross town.
You know what? This is what I actually think this is really funny, because that was still our generation was
Yes,
that. We were outside.
absolutely.
Yeah.
We walked all over town
Yeah.
to go to friends' house and stuff. Like we didn't have I think instant messaging came out when I was in junior high or high school. It really became like everybody had it.
Yeah.
It wasn't so just like a few people had, AOL was a big deal at that point. Like if you had
very
AOL,
much.
it was a big
Uh-huh.
deal.
Yeah.
And it was like, whoa, you could chat, instant messaging. Wow. And then it was like cell phones started. Then it was text
Mhm.
messaging. And it just got, I mean, the jump from 1999 to now is insane.
Oh, it's
the
outrageous.
drastic differences between 99 to now is like, if you were to look from 79 to 99, there's big jumps, but it's crazy. We were talking about it today just with like what phones can do now. You have you have the world's knowledge at your fingertips all the time.
I
That's
actually
crazy.
think you can get a college education on YouTube. So
You can.
That's just my opinion.
As long as
Why would I
you
wanna go to
know
Stanford?
what is actually true,
right.
because you can put
Very
anything on the
true.
internet.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly.
This will kind of take me into the next thing is we're just talking about the distractions, and we hardest time to focus on God. And I'll start with this one just for myself is the hardest time for me to really focus on worshiping God is, I mean, it's really difficult for me to worship when I think it goes to what you're saying about time, Jerry, when I feel like I deserve a break or I
Mhm.
deserve a time. When I'm very me focused on what I need or what I want, that's where it's just like worship is not even, or at least worshiping God is not at the forefront. I'm worshiping, in all honesty, I'm worshiping Netflix.
Mhm.
That's what I'm doing with my time is I'm watching a TV show.
Right.
And that's what I have put as the most important thing in my life. And then another thing that is really like, it's hard because I have a hard time with this one, and I think you guys can both relate to this, is sometimes my family is going before God. And that's a hard pill to swallow when you have to realize that you need to put something before your family.
Right.
And it's not easy to do because there's emotions that go with it. Now, I know, Patricia, you don't have children yet, but like Jerry, you've got grandkids now, great grandkids probably, right?
No.
And
No. Come on. I have 7 grandkids, but no great grandkids yet.
but
I started very young at that point.
but my point is, you would do anything for your kids. You would do anything for your grandkids. So to think that something is going to come before them is hard to grasp. Like,
Right.
I hold my son's hand, and there's a feeling that 100% when my first son was born, and the first time that his hand grabs my finger, I literally looked over at my dad who was in the room, and I was like, I get it now. Right. This is crazy. It's such a cool, and it's a you can't explain it. That experience you cannot explain. And my point is to think that now there's something that I love this child so much, but you know what? There's something that's going to come before this kid still, and it has to be God, and that's what it's going to be, and that's hard. It's not easy. So I actually think that my family sometimes can be a distraction from me worshiping. And now God's also blessed me with an incredibly godly wife who sees that also, and we're able to hold each other up with this and be like, no, let's pray together. We need to put God as the focus. God's the center of our family. Right. And so I've been very blessed in that way that's in my life. But I know a lot of people, they're not blessed with that. Like they might have that conflict in their maybe not their marriage, but their siblings or their parents or whatever it is, and it can be difficult. It can come in the way. So it's difficult.
Well, and I think too, when your kids reach that age when they're in sports and like soccer and little league and things like that, and you're 3 nights a week out for practice and games, and all of a sudden the games are on Sundays, and it's like, wait a minute, that's our family time to go to church, and you're competing with that, and it's like, oh, especially if your kids get involved in traveling things, that's almost all weekend, and you devote everything to that, to your kids, and all of a sudden you're going, wait a minute, I'm not having my time with the Lord anymore. I'm not taking Sunday as a serious day that's my day to worship, and so it those are difficult years when your kids are doing that, because it is a tough battle and a fight, and it's hard to tell your kids, we're not doing that on Sunday. And when I was coaching, I was really trying to make sure we never had practices, especially like on weekends, things like that,
Right.
or anything like that on Sundays, and try to always avoid. I would always tell who was running the league, hey, can we just not do this on Sunday? And sometimes you have a choice, sometimes you don't, but that's definitely a thing.
So what are some of the biggest distractions for you two just in worshiping God?
I think in for me in general, it's anytime that I can set aside, kind of like you were saying, for myself in a way, whether it's mindless scrolling, whether it's binge watching something.
You end up taking a break from God.
Right. And I think the way you phrased it is so true, that it's that me time that immediately is taking the focus off of, but I only have me time because I'm a child of God and he's blessed me so
And the
greatly.
ironic thing is the best thing for your me time is God.
Right.
and we
I'm
still
like,
go to something else.
This is backwards.
Yeah.
So I think filling that time with just other things that may kind of bring me some, some laughs or some enjoyment in the moment, but they don't actually feed my soul. So I'm still weary. I'm still stressed, or I'm still tired, or whatever it is. Where if I had truly spent that time with God, then I would walk away fulfilled, satisfied, and at least at peace with what may be going on. It's totally different.
Well, I think worship is so much different for everybody else, and for us, it's music because we're involved with music, and so that's kind of when somebody say, what's worship? I mean, that's kind of my first go-to thing. And as far as distractions go, not being a vocalist, I'm not usually paying attention to lyrics as much, right? And so when I first started playing in the worship team, my preparation during the week would be, looking at what key we're in, what's the time signature, all the technical stuff. And I'm, doing the chords. Am I getting it right? Am I getting the right sound and all those kind of things? And that's where I started. And so it became all the technical stuff. And pretty soon I show up for the weekend and I don't even know the words we're doing, So what I started doing, and this is maybe about 2 years in.
Andrea doesn't always know the words we're doing either. And she's a singer.
I heard that last week too. Yeah. Unless it's on the back wall, right? So
I hope she listens to this.
Yes, me too. That's payback. So anyway, about 2 years into it, I kind of realized what was going on, and it was like, and then so by the time the weekend is over, I've played on stage and I played the key parts and everything, and I really wasn't paying attention to the songs we're singing.
Right.
And so about 2 years into it, I started my practice in preparation for the weekend. I started with the lyrics, and it would really just, before even looking at what key we were playing at, I would just start reading the lyrics and start going that way, and that actually started becoming almost my Bible study. And I would start there and looking at the lyrics, and all of a sudden you're going, well, what's that? What verse does that come from?
Yeah.
And then I start chasing down that rabbit hole, and now all of a sudden that's my Bible study for that week, is I'm like just spending time. I'll pick one song or something.
That's something, actually, just a tangent real quick. That's something just as we can encourage, you, the listeners, if there's a couple songs that we do as a church that you really love, another really great way to be worshiping through that song is to do what Jerry just said. Go look at where the lyrics came from.
Right.
They're not just artsy things. Like, most of the lyrics we're singing are directly from Scripture, and you're singing verses from the Bible, and it's really cool when you go, oh, that's like directly from that psalm that David wrote, where it's talking about. I tried to come up with an example off the top of my head just now, and it didn't work, but there's plenty of those examples where they're all from Scripture, and it's really great. There's one song that we used to sing, and it's called God of Our Salvation. It's a Phil Wickham song from probably like 2011 or something like that. And the verse is literally just John 3:16. It's just, God so loved his children, he gave his only son that we would be forgiven. Like that, it's like, that's straight from, that's the gospel. That's really, it's really cool to go look and see where those are written in Scripture.
Right. I think like right now we're doing a song called My Testimony, and I wrote this down. It was like one of the lyrics that just really hit me the other day from when I was looking at this it says, this is my testimony, death to life. Grace has changed my story. And I'll testify. And that whole thing of grace has changed my story is so huge. I mean, that's really the gospel right there.
Grace rewrote my story.
Grace rewrote my story.
You should learn the lyrics better.
I should probably learn. Did I write them down wrong? Yeah, yes, I did. But changed my story. I like change, whatever. I like to change the lyrics.
I'm just giving you a hard time, dude.
Yeah. So
it's his testimony.
it's my testimony. It's
Yes,
not your testimony.
Yep, not mine.
When it's your time to do your
Yours,
testimony,
grace
you
can change yours.
It can
It'll
be
rewrite
changed or
mine.
rewrite, whatever. Yeah. But so whoever you are, I mean, it's God's grace that changes your story,
Amen.
or rewrites it, or whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They mean the same thing, I guess, right? Yeah.
Potato,
That's
potato.
great. Yeah, great input there. Good job, Jerry.
Thank
we don't
you.
say that very often.
You don't say
Good
that at
job,
all.
Jerry.
Yeah.
No.
Rarely get that.
I've heard a lot. We talked about emotions and feelings a little bit earlier, and I want to talk about that a little bit too, because feelings and emotions can sometimes get in the way for me.
Mm-hmm.
They can be a big distraction, and a specific example of this happened back in, I believe it was the end of August, it was in September, and I got a text message from my wife, I don't know, 5 minutes before we went on stage, and I didn't see it, but Kiki comes running back to the green room asking me, "Where's Caitlin?" Which is a very odd question for Kiki to be asking me. Where's Caitlin? Where's Caitlin? And I'm like, she's at a photo shoot. She goes, "No, I mean exactly where is Caitlin?" And I'm like, "She's Helen Putnam. That's where her photo shoot's at. Why?" And she goes, and this is like 5 minutes before we're going on stage. She goes, "I just got a call from Caitlin," who's my wife, just if you guys didn't know that. She said something about somebody's chasing her. And I couldn't really understand what she was saying. And she was driving, and she said something about being in a collision. And if you can imagine the vast, the many different things that went through my brain at that point. Now, the thing you also need to know about Kiki is if anybody's going to take care of a situation, it's going to be Kiki.
Oh, absolutely.
So she basically just said, "I don't know what's going on. I will figure it out. John Knapp is going to go, and Lauren are going to go drive to where her photo shoot was and track her down, and we're going to go find her because no service at Helen Putnam, right?" So her service was going in and out. So Kiki says, "Go lead worship, go do your thing, and then figure it out after." Now, I can see Kiki in the back at the sound booth talking to people.
Oh, my God.
I did not remember anything because my emotions were in the way. However, my emotions started as a distraction, but then I had to completely surrender that, and I had to not let my emotions be a distraction, but rather let my emotions be something that I could surrender to God and be like, "You know what? I don't know what's going on right now." And I'm thinking worst case scenario, obviously, like with that kind of thing, right? And I had to surrender to God. I don't even remember now. This was like the next week. I was like, I don't remember what songs we sang that week because it was something that got me to this place of like, I'm not just worshiping God through music. I'm worshiping God with my life right now. Like everything that I'm doing, because I was so thankful that she was okay. And it was a crazy situation. She ended up being completely fine. She was not hurt. She's shaken up a little bit, and it was a strange occurrence. But it was one of those situations where I realized, like, man, if I'm not careful, my emotions, they become the wall that's between me and worshiping God. Or I can just completely surrender my feelings and emotions and my thoughts all to God. And you know what? I'm going to worship God, give it all to Him, and I'm not going to let this affect it. It's not going to be a distraction. Mm-hmm. So yeah, what's your experience with this? Feelings and emotions, how can they be a distraction? Or how can they get in the way? Or how can they help?
Right. I think, well, as a vocalist, and I'm a very emotional person. I emote naturally all the time in just my day-to-day. So I think with vocals, it's one of those things where if I get too caught up in the emotion, like even if it's just, I really love this song, these lyrics I really connect with.
Yeah.
I guess, sometimes we do.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I cannot vocalize if I am that emotional.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's sometimes this sense of I want to be connected to that worshipful moment in leading, but still being able to lead.
Yeah.
And so there's this balance that comes with and praying, being prayed up beforehand. Lord, I really, really connect with this song. So help me emote, help me lead worship with this, but also be able to get through it, and not be like a ball of tears.
And genuinely.
And genuinely, exactly. It's
that
like,
can be
let
tough.
my
I mean,
heart show.
we sing songs a lot. It can become robotic. So being
Right.
genuine in what we're doing can be a challenge.
Right.
And I think, I mean,
It's a
not I
fine
think,
balance.
I know that without giving it all to God from the start, you're
Mhm.
not going to be able to be genuine. If you're completely just depending on your own strength and your own abilities, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, there's no way.
You know, and maybe you could
No
maybe
way.
you could have a good weekend like that where you're like, hey, that weekend went really well,
Right.
and you go, wow, I didn't. I mean, I can't tell you how many times where it's like I've been on stage, we're leading worship, and I'm thinking, okay, the whatever it is, the click track's not working or
Mhm.
something. And I look back at the drummer and I'm like, or I don't have a click. I did this a couple weeks ago with Ricky. I looked back at him, my in-ears had gone out, so I couldn't hear the click track, which is, I can get through it knowing having the songs memorized.
Right.
I don't have to have the click track, but there are spots where it's just the guitar playing. And so I just need to let Ricky know, I need you to keep that time for me
Mhm.
so I know where I'm at. And there's been times where something like that has happened and I get past the first song or something and I realize I legitimately did not think about God once during that song. And it kills me to admit that, but it's
Right.
true because things they can just get in the way.
Absolutely.
And it's so easy. So to be genuine, and I say this when I pray before the service, I say this often. I pray for God to help us worship him with our whole heart, not with part of it. God doesn't deserve just part of it. He deserves the
Right.
whole thing. And I think there's a worship album. I think it's Passion, or maybe it's Matt Redman. And it's literally, the album is called Whole Heart. And worshiping God with the whole heart is something I pray all the time, because I don't want that just to happen when I'm playing music. I want to worship God with
Mhm.
my whole heart when I'm setting up the sound system. I want to
Right.
worship God with my whole heart when I'm sitting in my small group, when I'm sitting in my living room with my kids playing a game, when we're having dinner, when I'm hanging out with my friends, when I'm playing basketball, whatever it is. I want this to be worship with my whole heart, because I know that God can do amazing things through everything that we're doing. And if we are 100% worshiping him in all that we do, he's going to do amazing things through those, through build relationships, impact people in different ways. It's going to be, you'll see the impacts of it.
Mhm.
Before we head out here, I do want to have you just mention one more time, or maybe not one more time, but just anything feelings about worship. Now, I know you guys have a lot of notes there because I gave you guys, this is something else you all should know about me. I call these Garett-sized emails. I'm very wordy. When I send things out, I'm very wordy. And I go, yeah, we'll talk about all this stuff. And then I look down and we're an hour in and I'm like, yeah, we talked about like 40% of this maybe. But that just means next time we do this, we have a lot more to talk about, right? So I want to ask you just any other thoughts on worship, because I want this also to be another opportunity for us to encourage our Spring Hills Church family in worship, and not just worship through music, but worship beyond the stage. So any other words you guys that you wrote in your notes there? It can be one of your favorite song of yours, how it impacts you, anything, just to encourage our church.
Well, I think it kind of goes back to a little bit of what we were talking about with lyrics to certain songs, and how they can really help you get into that mindset of worship, that heart. There's better words for that, but they're the heart mindset, if that makes sense. And I think for me, something that I can go back to, because it is so scriptural, are those old hymns.
Yes.
And I grew up on those. And I know I'm in the same company here of people who didn't. There's so many times I can go back and think, for example, "It Is Well," right? I mean, those lyrics get me.
Go look up the
Every
story
time.
of it,
Yes.
too. Oh, my goodness.
Oh, Horatio G. Spafford.
Yes.
I know. I
mean,
know
the
story.
story of, Horatio G. Spafford. If you want to go look up an amazing story of somebody who had the heart of worship, go read the
Absolutely.
story of when he wrote that song, because it's unbelievable. And I don't want to tell you what it is, because
No, but
I
look
want you
it
to,
up.
I want your jaw to drop and be like, this guy
Absolutely.
wrote this song when that happened?
Yeah.
Check it out.
Yeah. I mean, the testimony, just in that, and just lyrically, I can read through those lyrics, pray through them, and they sustain me, because I know, one, they're scriptural, but also it's just seeing what God can accomplish in the midst of, what was the heavy billows roll, all these beautiful language that's used there. But those old hymns to me are just so comforting. Not just because I grew up with them, but because now I can look at them and see scripture like jumping out of those lyrics at me. Where when I was a kid, I didn't understand that. It's just what we sang in church.
Yeah.
Now it means
and
so much
possibly
more.
even just like it was just a boring song we sang.
Exactly,
in church.
right?
I mean,
It was
that
like,
happened to me a lot growing up.
Right. It didn't have meaning to as much for me as they do now. So that's one thing that I think I can definitely say helps, I go back to when it comes to worship.
There's a really great if you don't know much about hymns, there's a really great kind of a chunk of time where all of the current worship artists redid a bunch of these old hymns.
Right.
And it's really cool because they revived a lot of these songs that I don't want to say that they went away because there were people still singing them, but the younger generation, a lot of us didn't really know those songs if we didn't grow up in church,
Exactly.
right? And so when we're singing these songs, these hymns, and there's hymns that like my dad will still mention them every now and then, and I'm like, I didn't even know that was a hymn because there are hundreds of them or thousands.
Yeah.
There's so many of them, and they're great. And so looking up those words, it's like they're so. I mean, or looking at the lyrics, they're so full. They're really great.
Are.
Come Thou Fount has been one of my favorites for a long time because. There's the line in that one, let thy goodness like a fetter bind my wandering heart to thee. And it's like, I didn't know what a fetter was, but basically it's a chain. So let your goodness be the chain that links my heart to you.
Right.
And like, it's like, I mean, talk about being artistic in the way that you explain
Right.
something. Like, wow, that's awesome.
Poetic.
So yeah,
I
poetic.
think,
It's
too.
so cool. Yeah.
How Great Thou Art is another one for me.
There's not a lot of modern Christian artists that are writing songs like the hymns like that, where you have to kind of go and see what was he talking about. What's
And
that word? You know,
study.
I think Crowder's one of those guys that kind of still does a lot of that, and you have to kind of some of the words he uses. You're like, what was that? I don't
Well,
know
then
what
you've
that
got
is, you know?
you've got the group of guys that were writing modern hymns.
Right.
True.
They were writing
Right.
hymns in the 90s and the early 2000s. And, I mean, Tomlin's written some, and
Yeah.
Tomlin's even taken some, there was this whole span of time where they were taking parts of hymns and adding them into their songs. Like
Right.
Cornerstone, a lot of people don't know that the verses of Cornerstone are from a hymn, The Solid Rock. And a lot of people didn't know that because it's just, that's a great song. And people know Cornerstone as Cornerstone. And it's like,
Right.
that's from an old hymn. And it's really cool the way that these guys have done that. So, yeah.
Well, I think for a lot of people, music is just music in general, whether it's secular music or whatever. It's so powerful. And you can hear a song and it'll take you back to a certain point in your life or an event. But I realize that's not for everybody. I've got a friend that, man, he doesn't even like to come to church during the music part of it because the music is just not his thing. But he's been, faithfully teaching at the juvenile hall ministry for 40 years now.
Wow.
I mean, that's his thing, right? I mean, but just music doesn't float his boat, doesn't get him emotional or whatever.
I will never understand it, but
Yeah.
you know what?
Right.
But
you do you.
Right. But
Exactly.
for me, I mean, it's like, again, I think that's listening to the music and then following where the lyrics go and going to the Bible from that. I will sometimes get more from a song than I do. I don't want to say this, Brett might hear this, but listening to a pastor or somebody talk and teaching a lesson or something.
Brett's a musician. He's
He's a
understand
musician.
that.
He knows
gets
that
it.
what he's talking about. Right. Thanks, Brett. But there's something that I walk away getting more out of a song that we did versus the sermon. And I'll remember the song more. And that, if that's the way you remember, then that's a great way to do it, I think. But, I think, for me, just like worship is just, and the music is so powerful. And, it's how I communicate. And
Yeah.
it's what,
Yeah, I mean, I sing constantly.
true.
That's it. It's all over in my life. It's just music is like, it's everywhere. It's all over my tattoos on my arm too. So I
Right.
mean, like it's ingrained in me just to be like, I dream in music sometimes. Like I literally dream with a soundtrack, which is really. So I've said that to some people. They're like, wait, what? And just like some people say they might dream in cartoons or something like that.
Right.
I'm like, wait, hold on, what? And if I say like there's music in my dreams, it's like, wait, how does that work? And I'm like, I don't know. God's
it just
fascinating.
happens.
You know what?
I
God's
dream in
not
2
boring, you guys.
languages.
Yes.
It's all good.
That's amazing. Yes.
I
That's
just-
another thing about Patricia. The fun fact, she's bilingual.
It's true.
I just wish I could actually sing because, I mean, music is so important to me, but I can't sing.
We know that. We know that you can't sing. Well, thank you both so much for coming down. So Patricia and Jerry, they'll be back on this on the Worship Beyond the Stage podcast episode. So you'll hear them again. You'll also hear them on stage often over the next, especially Church on the Lawn right now. So come join us. We're finally getting to meet live again, and it's great. Jerry, you have not been able to be with us on the stage outside yet, right?
Not yet.
Yeah, so Patricia, you've been there a few times.
Yes.
Jerry, you did get to record with us a few times, and we're still doing that too, so maybe you'll see Jerry online also. So thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it, and we'll catch you guys next time with Beyond the Stage.